The basalt cobblestones were still dark with the night's dampness, cold enough to bite through the worn leather of a pair of simple sandals. Above the high stone walls, the sky was not yet blue, but the pale, bruised violet that belongs only to the final hour before sunrise. Somewhere down the alleyway, a heavy timber door creaked open on iron hinges, releasing the dry, warm scent of baking flour into the cool sea breeze. A stray dog stirred in a recessed doorway, its ears twitching at the rhythmic scrape of a stiff broom clearing dust from a baker's threshold. Oil lamps flickered behind slatted wooden shutters, casting long, trembling fingers of amber light across the damp basalt blocks. Everything felt entirely ordinary: the quiet rustle of old blankets indoors, the faint clatter of terracotta bowls being set upon a counter, the steady breath of a sleeping city. There was no warning in the chill air, only the gentle, unhurried waking of another quiet morning. Inside the sheltered courtyard of the bakery, the air was warm, dense, and thick with the comforting, yeasty perfume of dough rising under damp linen covers. Fine, white flour dust hung suspended in the stillness, floating like soft winter fog in the low amber light cast by the brick oven. Deep within its vaulted dome, embers glowed a quiet, amber red, radiating a gentle heat that pushed back the lingering dampness of the autumn night. Heavy wooden paddles leaned against the whitewashed masonry, their worn pines smooth from decades of oil and palm grease. Large, lava-stone mills stood like silent sentinels in the shadows, their heavy upper stones resting after a long night of grinding grain into pale dust. A cat slept atop a stack of woven grain sacks, its sides rising and falling in rhythmic peace. In this small sanctuary of wood, stone, and fire, the morning's quiet labor unfolded uninterrupted, cradled in the reassuring rhythms of human warmth. A few streets away, beyond the narrow stone alleys, the pale golden sunlight reached the high rim of a grand villa's open atrium. The morning air here was crisp and still, carrying the faint tang of sea salt from the bay mixed with damp earth. Bare feet stepped onto the cool, smooth mosaic floor, where thousands of tiny dark tiles formed intricate geometric patterns beneath a whisper of morning dust. Above, light filtered through the roof opening, pouring into the shallow stone basin below. The surface of the pool was glass-like, mirroring a square of soft blue sky and the gentle drift of early morning clouds. Surrounding the water, the tall plaster walls glowed with brilliant ochre reds and vivid sea greens, painted with mythic gardens that never withered. Every leaf and painted vine caught the quiet slant of dawn, holding the stillness of a house that had just begun to wake to the gentle routine of another calm morning. Stepping out from the shadowed shade of the atrium into the sunlit courtyard garden, the air grew warmer, filled with the sharp, sweet fragrance of crushed thyme and sun-baked soil. High above the garden beds, the pale silver leaves of a slender olive tree shivered softly, though no breeze stirred the humid air. Beneath the thin leather soles of a pair of woven sandals, the stone tiles did not slip, yet they carried a strange, low pulse. It was a faint, rolling vibration felt in the bones of the ankles rather than heard by the ear, a subtle hum easily mistaken for a heavy grain cart rumbling over the uneven basalt street outside. High in the corners where plaster met brick, fine white dust drifted down in tiny, quiet clouds from the archways, settling like flour onto the wet grass below. The stone fountain held its breath for a fleeting second, its gentle trickle faltering before returning to its peaceful morning rhythm, unaware of the deep earth shifting silently far below. Beyond the arched entryway, the narrow street opened into the vast, quiet expanse of the marketplace colonnade. Here, where long shadows stretched between towering limestone pillars, the city's daily rhythm began with a familiar, rhythmic scraping sound. An elderly shopkeeper moved steadily across the smooth marble steps of his storefront, holding a broom fashioned from coarse twigs. With deliberate, sweeping strokes, he pushed a scattered layer of dry pine needles and fallen oak leaves off the stone and into the shallow basalt gutter below. The air smelled crisp and slightly dry, carrying the scent of parched earth and pine sap warmed by the early sunlight filtering through the grand arches. Beside him, rows of empty wooden stalls stood silent in the amber glow, their timber counters waiting for bundles of fresh figs, terracotta olive jars, and folded linens. Each rasp of his broom echoed softly against the high portico, a humble, grounding task carried out without any knowledge that this morning's dust would soon be washed away by fire. A few steps beyond the colonnade, the dry scrape of twigs gave way to the soft, rhythmic splash of falling water. At the corner of two narrow stone avenues stood a tall public fountain, carved from thick slabs of dark volcanic rock. From the mouth of a bronze lion head, a steady, crystalline stream spilled into a deep rectangular basin below, filling the quiet street with a soothing, hollow murmur. The stone rim was polished smooth, dipped in the center where generations of tired shoulders, leaning children, and thirsty travelers had rested their palms over decades of cool mornings. Dampness hung heavy in the shadow of the fountain wall, carrying the crisp, mineral tang of mountain runoff mixed with green moss clinging to the lead pipes. A young woman paused here, dipping her terracotta jug beneath the gushing spout, the ice-cold stream splashing softly over her knuckles, a brief flicker of pure relief before the morning heat took hold. Climbing the stone staircase to a high, open-air balcony, the gentle murmur of the water fountain faded into the vast, quiet expanse of the sleeping city. Here, above the shaded street, the air was warm and wide, carrying a delicate symphony of morning scents. The rich, sticky sweetness of figs roasting in a charcoal oven mixed with the sharp, crisp salt of the sea breeze floating up from the bay. Yet beneath the comforting aromas of breakfast and ocean spray, a strange, phantom trace lingered, a barely perceptible hint of sour sulfur, fine as a cobweb on the back of the throat. It was so faint, so fleeting, that anyone breathing it in simply blamed the hot springs or the distant salt marshes. Looking out past the mosaic railing, the red-tiled roofs spread like a warm sea of terracotta toward the loom of the great mountain, standing serene and lush under the golden sky. Descending back down to the shadow of the stone alley, the gentle warmth of the morning sun pooled in golden diamonds across the uneven flagstones. Outside the arched doorway of an old apothecary, a stray dog lay curled in a bright patch of light, its ribcage rising and falling in deep, undisturbed slumber. Above its resting spot, bunches of dried sage, rosemary, and sweet lavender dangled from tarnished copper hooks, casting long, geometric shadows against the weathered plaster wall. A soft current of warm air drifted through the threshold, rustling the withered leaves and sending tiny specks of golden dust dancing through the sunbeams. The dog shifted slightly, paws twitching in a quiet dream, its dark fur bathed in the soft glow of the morning. On any other day, the scent of crushed herbs and sun-baked earth was a promise of healing and quiet routines, a gentle rhythm that seemed as permanent as the heavy stone walls framing the quiet street. A few paces down the narrow street, the tranquil silence yielded to the dry, rhythmic clatter of daily commerce. A heavy wooden cart bumped over the deep grooves worn into the volcanic basalt flagstones, its iron-bound wheels scraping softly against the quiet morning air. Inside the slatted frame of the wagon, dozens of tall, pointed pottery amphorae leaned against one another, their coarse terracotta bellies clinking softly with every jolt of the road. The sharp, earthy scent of cured olive oil and aged wine hung faintly about the cart, baked into the porous clay by years of Mediterranean sun. A delivery man led his slow-footed mule by a worn leather strap, his calloused thumb resting against the beast's coarse mane as they navigated the deep ruts carved by generations of iron wheels. Shadow and sunlight flickered across the stacked vessels, catching the dried sea salt crust around their corked lips, a quiet herald of another ordinary workday. As the cart's iron rumble faded around a sharp turn, the street broadened into a quiet residential square bathed in amber sunlight. Here, the heavy smells of olive oil gave way to the dry, chalky dust of lime-washed masonry. On a low wall of smooth gray tufa, 3 children huddled together, their hushed giggles echoing softly off the shuttered facades. Small fingers, smudged with white gypsum, dragged soft chunks of chalk across the stone, tracing clumsy outlines of gladiators and four-legged beasts. Above their heads, half-eroded red election slogans painted in bold Latin script flaked in the gentle coastal breeze, forgotten remnants of past spring votes, now yielding to the morning play. The air felt calm and still, thick with the scent of drying mortar, lavender potted on upper windowsills, and the innocent scrape of chalk. Every scratch on the wall was a fleeting mark of joy, made under an expansive, unbothered blue sky that promised nothing but warmth. A few steps past the quiet square, where the stone path inclined steeply toward a private garden terrace, the view opened wide over the pale, mirror-flat waters of the bay. Up here, high above the tile roofs, the morning air was cooler, carrying the faint, salty tang of sea foam mixed with the sweet pine scent of tall, dark cypress trees framing the horizon. Moments before, the branches had been alive with the sharp, cheerful chatter of finches and swallows, their small wings rustling against the dark green needles. But then, without warning, the birds went utterly still. The sudden silence was so heavy it felt almost tangible, sinking into the sun-warmed stone balustrade like a cold draught. Below, the sea remained impossibly calm, reflecting a hazy blue sky that seemed frozen in time. Not a breeze stirred the leaves, nor did a single chirp break the eerie hush that hung over the bay, suspended in quiet, breathless expectation. Down below the high terrace, in a shaded stone courtyard hidden away from the main thoroughfare, that sudden silence settled over the quiet routines of the morning. Stretched between 2 tall plaster walls, long sheets of fresh white linen hung heavy and damp on a woven rope line, swaying ever so slightly in the cool air. Cool water dripped slowly onto the terracotta pavers below, making a soft, rhythmic patter that only deepened the stillness. Then came the change, almost imperceptible at first. Tiny, pale flecks, as delicate and silent as midwinter frost, began to drift lazily down through the open rectangular skylight above. They settled softly upon the damp fabric, leaving faint gray smudges across the pristine white surface. A tired washerwoman reached out, brushing a dusting of pale grit off her forearm, frowning at the dry, powdery texture that smelled faintly of scorched earth. It was not rain, nor common dust, but something unnatural settling over the quiet home. Stepping out from the quiet courtyard into the vast expanse of the open plaza, the morning light hit with a sudden, blinding brilliance. Tall marble statues stood sharply against the blue sky, their pristine white surfaces bathed in warm sunlight. But the air itself was shifting. A strange, unnaturally warm gust swept down from the crest of the mountain, carrying a dry heat that felt alien against the crisp autumn morning. The wind gathered speed as it crossed the wide stone square, violently snapping the heavy canvas awnings above the merchant stalls. On a scribe's table, unrolled papyrus scrolls began to flutter wildly, their dry pages flipping with a sound like dry leaves scattering in a storm. Dust and fine white ash dance together in swirling eddies across the polished flagstones, rising in pale ghosts around the ankles of startled pedestrians. The atmosphere grew thick, dry, and heavy, smelling faintly of baked earth and pine resin as the mountain exhaled its hot breath across the city. At the intersection of the two main thoroughfares, where stepping stones crossed the grooved basalt street, the rhythm of daily life slowly stumbled to a halt. A water-bearer lowered his heavy terracotta jug to the curb, the cool water sloshing softly against the rim as he wiped sweat from his brow. A baker's boy, holding a tray of warm, round loaves, stopped mid-step, his eyes reflecting a strange, muted glow. Above the tiled rooftops, far past the northern gate, a massive column of pale dust and white vapor rose steadily into the azure sky, towering like an impossibly gigantic pine tree frozen in the wind. It cast a long, cooling shadow over the sunlit crowd below. There was no panic yet, no screaming in the streets, only a profound, collective stillness. Dozens of faces turned upward toward the silent giant, bathed in a shimmering, twilight glare, caught in a quiet moment of breathless, unsuspecting wonder. The shadow of the mountain stretches long over the red-tiled roofs, yet for a fleeting breath, the ordinary morning remains unbroken. In this fragile sliver of time, the world belongs to the simple acts of living, the sweep of a wooden broom, the warm steam of fresh bread, the familiar touch of a loved one's hand against a shoulder. We look back through the centuries not to witness the end, but to remember the quiet beauty of the beginning. Across every era, across every shore, human hearts wake to the same quiet hope, reaching out to touch the morning light before the day unfolds. We build our lives out of these small, delicate rituals, trusting in the permanence of the earth beneath our feet. And though the hours drift away like dust on the wind, the softness of a peaceful morning remains eternal, a gentle reminder that every sunlit moment, no matter how brief, is a quiet miracle we share together.